Emily Carter stood by the tall windows of her Beacon Hill townhouse, gazing out at the tree-lined streets below. To anyone looking in, her life seemed perfect. She was the wife of Nathan Anderson, a successful real estate mogul, and lived in one of the most coveted neighborhoods in Boston. The polished brass fixtures, marble floors, and carefully curated art that adorned their home told the story of wealth and power. Yet, Emily felt none of it belonged to her. For as long as she could remember, Emily had lived by the expectations of others. Growing up in Boston, her parents had instilled in her a deep sense of duty to their family name. They valued prestige and tradition above all else, and Emily was groomed to embody those ideals. She excelled in school, dressed impeccably, and attended the right social events. By the time she reached her 20s, her path had already been paved. Nathan was part of that plan. Wealthy, charismatic, and highly respected, he was the ideal partner in the eyes of her parents. And for a time, Emily believed it herself. Their marriage was more of a business arrangement than a love story. Nathan was attentive when it suited him, but his ambitions left little room for true connection. Emily's role was clear. She was to be the elegant hostess, the supportive wife, and the quiet companion. Theirs was a life of lavish galas, high-profile dinners, and carefully orchestrated perfection. But behind the polished exterior, Emily felt like a shadow of herself. One morning, as she lay in bed staring at the ornate ceiling, the weight of it all became too much. The silence of the house, once a mark of tranquility, now felt suffocating. Nathan had left early for a meeting, and Emily found herself alone in the cavernous space. She wandered through the house, her bare feet cold against the marble. The grandeur around her felt hollow, a stark contrast to the emptiness she carried inside. Her steps led her to the study, where a grand piano stood unused. Emily sat down on the bench, her fingers grazing the keys. She hadn't played in years. Her parents had insisted on lessons throughout her childhood, but the music had never been hers. It had been another performance, another way to meet expectations. Tentatively, she pressed a key, the note ringing out softly. She pressed another, then another, until a simple melody filled the room. For the first time in years, Emily felt something stir within her, a small but insistent voice that reminded her of the person she used to be. The realization hit her with startling clarity. If she stayed, she would lose herself entirely. The decision to leave wasn't dramatic. There was no argument, no grand confrontation. Instead, it was a quiet resolve. She packed a small bag, taking only a few clothes and personal items, and left a note on the kitchen counter. As she stepped out onto the street, a rush of fear and exhilaration coursed through her. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she couldn't stay. Emily's first call was to Rachel Harper, her closest friend and confidant. Rachel had always been different from the world Emily had grown up in. She was warm, authentic, and fiercely independent. Unlike Emily, Rachel had never let societal expectations dictate her life. She lived in Brooklyn, in a small, eclectic apartment filled with books, plants, and mismatched furniture. When Emily explained her situation, Rachel didn't hesitate. "Come to Brooklyn," she said firmly. "You can stay with me until you figure things out." Brooklyn was unlike anything Emily had experienced before. It was chaotic, vibrant, and unapologetically real. The streets buzzed with life, street vendors, musicians, and people of every background moving with purpose. Rachel's apartment, though modest, was filled with warmth. The scent of fresh herbs lingered in the air, and jazz records played softly in the background. Emily felt an immediate sense of belonging that she hadn't felt in years. "It's not much," Rachel said with a grin, handing Emily a mug of tea. "But it's home." Emily smiled, tears welling in her eyes. "It's perfect," she said softly. Over the next few days, Emily began to adjust to her new reality. Rachel encouraged her to take small steps toward rebuilding her life. "You don't have to have it all figured out," she said one evening as they sat on the fire escape, watching the city lights twinkle. "Just start somewhere." Taking Rachel's advice, Emily began looking for a job. She hadn't worked in years, her time consumed by managing Nathan's social calendar and their household. She worried she had no skills to offer. But Rachel was quick to dispel that notion. "You're capable of more than you think," she said. Emily eventually found work at a small coffee shop called the Cozy Corner Cafe. It was a far cry from the glamorous events she used to host. But there was something grounding about the work. The shop's owner, Susan Miller, was a no-nonsense woman with a kind heart. On Emily's first day, Susan handed her an apron and showed her how to work the register. At first, Emily fumbled with the simplest tasks. She spilled coffee, mixed up orders, and struggled to keep up with the morning rush. But Susan was patient, guiding her with steady encouragement. "Everyone starts somewhere," she said with a wink. Over time, Emily began to find her rhythm. The smell of freshly brewed coffee, the hum of conversation, and the simple satisfaction of a job well done brought a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. She got to know the regulars, like Mr. Wilson, who always ordered a black coffee and read the newspaper at the corner table, or the group of college students who filled the cafe with laughter every Friday afternoon. The Cozy Corner became more than just a workplace. It became a community. And for Emily, it was the first step toward discovering who she truly was. Brooklyn wasn't what Emily had expected, but it was exactly what she needed. The carefully curated life she had left behind in Boston felt like a distant memory. Here, in the heart of Brooklyn, surrounded by imperfect yet genuine people, Emily began to find herself again. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect, but it was real, and for the first time in her life, that was enough. Life in Brooklyn was a mix of challenges and quiet triumphs for Emily Carter. Each day at the Cozy Corner Cafe brought something new, a small victory, a lesson learned, or a connection made. Slowly, the pieces of her fractured identity began to come together, and the woman she was becoming started to feel like someone she could be proud of. The coffee shop became a haven for Emily. It was far removed from the lavish world of Beacon Hill, but the simplicity and sincerity of the place were exactly what she needed. Susan Miller, the cafe's owner, was more than just a boss. She was a mentor, guiding Emily not only through the intricacies of latte art, but also through the larger task of rebuilding her confidence. "You're doing fine, kid," Susan would say with a smile whenever Emily doubted herself. Give it time. And time was what Emily had. For the first time in years, she wasn't rushing to meet someone else's expectations. She began to recognize the regular customers by name and learn their quirks and preferences. Mr. Thompson, a retired teacher, loved sharing stories from his younger days as he sipped his morning espresso. A group of college students frequented the cafe on weekends, their animated debates filling the space with youthful energy. Each interaction reminded Emily of the importance of genuine connection, something she had missed for far too long. Brooklyn itself became a source of inspiration. Emily found herself drawn to its vibrant streets, alive with a kind of raw authenticity she had never experienced in Boston. The neighborhood was filled with murals, street vendors, and the hum of people from all walks of life. It was messy and imperfect, but it was real. On her days off, Emily wandered through the local markets and parks, soaking in the diversity and energy around her. It was at the Cozy Corner Cafe, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, that Emily met Jack Thompson. He stepped into the cafe, shaking the raindrops from his leather jacket and flashing a warm smile that immediately caught her off guard. He ordered a caramel latte, his voice steady and unhurried, as though he had all the time in the world. "You look new here," Jack said with an easy grin, noticing Emily's nervous hands fumbling with the cup. "I am," she admitted, trying to steady herself as she handed him the drink. "Still figuring it all out. Looks like you're doing just fine," Jack replied, his tone reassuring. Their exchange was brief, but something about it stayed with Emily. There was an ease to Jack that she found disarming. Unlike Nathan's calculated charm, Jack's presence felt genuine, free of pretense or expectation. Jack quickly became a regular at the cafe. He usually came in during the afternoons, ordering the same caramel latte and sitting by the window with a book or his laptop. Their conversations grew longer with each visit, lighthearted at first, but gradually more personal. Jack had a way of making Emily feel seen, not as the person she had once been, but as the person she was becoming. One evening, as the cafe was winding down and the last of the customers had left, Jack lingered. The rain had stopped, and the faint glow of the city lights spilled through the windows. Emily was wiping down the counter when Jack approached, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets. "I know this might be a little forward," he began, his smile tinged with nervousness. "But would you like to grab dinner with me sometime?" Emily froze for a moment, her mind racing. It had been so long since anyone had asked her something so simple, so honest. For years, her relationships had been defined by obligation and appearances. But Jack's question felt different. There was no pressure, only an invitation. "I'd like that," she said finally, her smile breaking through her hesitation. Their first date was at a small Italian bistro in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. The atmosphere was cozy, with checkered tablecloths and candlelight that flickered softly against the walls. It was nothing like the grand, meticulously orchestrated dinners she had attended with Nathan. Instead of champagne and silent judgments, there was laughter and the clink of glasses filled with house wine. Over plates of pasta and freshly baked bread, Emily found herself opening up in ways she hadn't expected. She told Jack about her upbringing in Boston, her marriage to Nathan, and the courage it had taken to leave everything behind. Jack listened without interrupting, his eyes steady and understanding. "That takes a lot of strength," he said when she finished, "to walk away from something that doesn't feel right, even when it's comfortable." His words stayed with Emily long after the evening ended. For the first time, she felt truly heard, not as a wife, a daughter, or a socialite, but as herself. Their relationship grew naturally, without the need for grand gestures or calculated moves. Jack became a steady presence in her life, encouraging her to explore her passions and reminding her of the beauty in the everyday. He noticed her fascination with the handmade candles sold at the local markets and suggested she try making her own. With his encouragement and Rachel's support, Emily began experimenting with scents and designs in the small kitchen of the apartment. At first, the results were far from perfect: candles that wouldn't set properly, soaps that cracked after drying. But Emily persisted. She found joy in the creative process, in the act of taking raw materials and turning them into something beautiful. Rachel helped her set up a stall at the Fulton Street Market, where Emily sold her first batch of lavender-scented candles. To her surprise, they sold out quickly, and customers began asking about other scents and products. The small success ignited a spark in Emily, and she started dreaming of expanding her little business. Brooklyn became more than just a place to start over. It became a home, the bustling streets, the warmth of Rachel's apartment, and the growing connections she had built all formed a tapestry of belonging. Emily's life was far from perfect, but it was hers. Through Jack's steady encouragement, Susan's mentorship, and Rachel's unwavering support, Emily began to reclaim the pieces of herself she had thought were lost forever. She wasn't the same person who had left Beacon Hill, and for the first time, she was glad. Emily Carter was finally becoming the woman she was meant to be. As Emily Carter's life in Brooklyn continued to take shape, she found herself stepping further away from the person she had been in Boston. The world she had left behind, the polished facade of Beacon Hill, the cold marble of her townhouse, and the suffocating expectations of her parents, felt like a distant memory. Brooklyn had become her sanctuary, and in its vibrant, messy streets, she was finally finding herself. Her handmade candle and soap business was growing steadily. What had started as a hobby had evolved into something more meaningful. With Rachel's help, she created an online store, and soon her products were being shipped to customers across the city. Emily found joy in every part of the process, from experimenting with new scents to hand packaging each order with care. It was work that felt personal, creative, and wholly her own. Jack Thompson became a constant in her life, not as a savior but as a partner. He supported her in ways that felt natural and unforced, always encouraging her to pursue her dreams. "You've got a gift," he would say as he watched her work on new creations. "People see that in what you make. Their relationship was a breath of fresh air for Emily. With Jack, there were no masks, no games, no expectations to be anything other than herself. They spent evenings exploring Brooklyn's hidden corners, cozy bookstores, bustling food markets, and quiet parks where they could sit and talk for hours. Jack had a way of grounding her, reminding her that life didn't have to be perfect to be beautiful. But not everything about her new life was easy. Emily's parents had been vocal in their disapproval of her decision to leave Nathan and the life they had envisioned for her. Phone calls with her mother were strained, filled with thinly veiled disappointment. "You had everything," her mother would say. "Why would you throw it all away?" At first, those words stung. Emily often found herself second-guessing her choices, wondering if she had made a mistake. But as time passed, she began to see the truth. What her parents saw as everything had felt like nothing to her. Their dreams were not her dreams, and she no longer needed their approval to validate her worth. One cold winter afternoon, Emily decided to confront those lingering doubts head-on. She called her mother, not to seek approval, but to set boundaries. "I know you don't understand my choices," she said firmly, "but this is my life now. I need you to respect that." The conversation wasn't easy, and there was no grand reconciliation, but it marked a turning point for Emily. For the first time, she felt free from the weight of their expectations. On a crisp autumn evening, Emily stood at her stall in the Fulton Street Market, surrounded by the glow of string lights and the hum of lively conversation. The scent of her latest creations, pumpkin spice candles and cinnamon-scented soaps, filled the air, drawing in customers who admired her work. Rachel was by her side, helping with sales, while Jack lingered nearby, chatting with a friend. As the night went on, Emily felt a deep sense of gratitude. The life she had built in Brooklyn was far from the grand, polished existence she had left behind. But it was real. It was hers. Later that evening, as she and Jack returned to Rachel's apartment, he handed her a small box wrapped in a golden ribbon. "What's this?" she asked, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Just open it," Jack said with a smile. Inside was a delicate necklace with a small compass charm. Emily's breath caught as she ran her fingers over the charm, its simple design carrying a profound message. "So you never forget," Jack said softly, "that you can always find your way." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. But this time, they weren't tears of sadness or regret. They were tears of joy, of gratitude, of relief. She looked at Jack, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the apartment's string lights, and felt a warmth she hadn't known in years. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Jack leaned in, his gaze steady. "No," he said. "Thank you for letting me be a part of this." As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Emily's life continued to bloom. Her business expanded, her relationships deepened, and her sense of self grew stronger with each passing day. Brooklyn had given her a second chance, not just at life, but at living. On the fire escape of Rachel's apartment one evening, Emily sat with Jack, a blanket wrapped around their shoulders as they watched the city lights twinkle in the distance. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the pain, the uncertainty, the courage it had taken to walk away from everything she knew. Brooklyn wasn't perfect, and neither was she. But in its imperfection, she had found a home, a purpose, and a love that didn't demand her to be anyone other than herself. Emily Carter was no longer the woman her parents had tried to shape or the trophy wife Nathan had wanted. She was simply Emily, flawed, strong, and whole. And for the first time in her life, that was enough. For